Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. It is I, your solo host, Dan Wiseman, once again. My co-host and good friend, Dan Morgan, is back stateside. Can you believe it? This time, it's in a professional capacity, not a personal one. He's just come back from a lovely holiday in Orlando, and now he's back stateside again with work, doing some amazing things for Goal. So if you haven't already, go and check out Goal USA socials, and there's plenty from Dan over there for you to enjoy if you're missing your fix of Mr. Morgan. But I'm here for you today. We've had a little break. I've had my summer break. I think it was about 4 days, so I apologize for the lack of content. I headed various family events and stuff like that. I had a lovely old weekend, but we're back at the grind. It's Monday, and the week has truly started. The rumour mill is in full effect. I'm here to talk to you about two players that Villa have been linked with in the last 48 hours or so. You've seen in the title, it is Pedro Gonçalves. If any Portuguese people that are listening, correct me in the comment. Pedro Gonçalves of Sporting Lisbon and Youri Tielemans of relegated Leicester City. We'll roll with Pedro first because I think more people will know a little bit more about Youri Tielemans. So I think for people that are watching this video, you're probably more inclined to hear a little bit about Pedro Gonçalves because he's not a name as many people are going to be familiar with. So let's get into it. He's a 24-year-old right winger from Sporting Lisbon. And he's a great pub quiz question because he has actually played for Wolves before. So he spent time in the West Midlands. He spent 2 years at Wolves during their promotion. He was with them in the season they got promoted from the Championship into the Premier League, and then 1 season in the Premier League before I moved back to Portugal and Famalicão. However, in his time at Molineux, he only made 1 substitute appearance. It was in a 2-0 win against Sheffield Wednesday in the EFL Cup. He was very, very young at this stage, a very, very raw talent. Didn't feature too much at Portugal. He was one of these big influx of Portuguese players into Wolves. One of the few stories that never really found his feet very well as a very young player after moving to England. After a youth career that saw him bounce around a lot of different clubs, spent time in England, a lot of time in Portugal before joining Wolves. And then, as I said, a bit of a pickup job in Famalicão before securing a move to Sporting Lisbon, where he has taken off. What a season he's had in the Primeira this season. One of the standout breakout stars of the league competition over in Portugal. He's bagged 15 goals this season for Sporting. Only 4 players in the entire division have done more, and he's done this from a sort of attacking midfield right wing position. So it's so impressive. Did so on an XG of 16.2. So did slightly underperform his XG there, but I mean, 15 goal return from a winger. Not too bad at all. He's the only player in the Primeira as well to reach double digits in assists. So that's a double-digit season in both goals and assists from him. 15 goals and 11 assists. Only 2 players in the whole league have created more chances than his total of 16. What an incredible season. He rightfully earned himself a spot in the Primeira team of the season as well. And this is interesting because Villa have been scouting him for some time. For those of you that have a really close eye on Villa transfer rumours, you'll have seen that we've had scouts. And look, you can take often very little from where we scout from because we'll have scouts going to leagues and clubs all over the world for all sorts of different reasons. But we have had a lot of clubs going to games in Portugal. And apparently we scouted him when Sporting Lisbon faced Arsenal in the Europa League. And that is where I think if you do know this name, that is where you'll know him from, because he scored an incredible goal from the halfway line in that game as Sporting knocked out Arsenal of that competition. And so that was his breakout moment. That is his welcome to the league moment. And from then on, he's been on an incredible trajectory. I mean, that was just one of the many amazing moments for this player throughout the season. You're looking at a fee that I think Villa have been pretty savvy on the whole since we got promoted with transfer fees. We haven't really broken the bank. But this, I think, this is where we'd have to probably go and spend a little bit of money. He has a release clause, apparently, of 80 million euros. I think we're seeing reports out of Portugal of Sporting. Anybody that wants to come and inquire about this player, that's what Sporting Lisbon are pointing towards. Like, yes, you can have Pedro if you're willing to pay that hefty release clause. And I mean, look, I don't think it will come to that. I think Normally, you'll find a middle ground. To be honest, even half of that it would be a great price. I don't think we get it that low, but it's really interesting, this one to follow. There's a few outlets reporting this out of Portugal. The Villa have advanced their approach for the Sporting Lisbon star, and we are now ready to make a move for this player. A concrete proposal is apparently yet to be made, but Villa are insistent on signing him. So some pretty strong words being used by a variety of different outlets. The 24-year-old is going to be hot property this year. So you imagine if we are going to have to do something for Pedro Gonçalves, it's got to happen quickly. And similarly, on one where Villa might have to act with a bit of haste if they'd like to get a deal done, is the second player we're talking about today, and that is Youri Tielemans. A player that, in terms of his profile, I don't think too many people will need an introduction of. Obviously, he's been... I feel like there's been a lot of noise around Youri Tielemans since he arrived in Leicester, and that's because of the player and the potential that he had when he arrived in the East Midlands from Monaco via Anderlecht, and it's particularly at Anderlecht where he started playing for their first team really, really young. We're talking like 16, 17 when he made his debut out in Belgium. He arrived from at Leicester from Monaco in January 2019 on a temporary loan deal. 6 months later, Leicester were very quick to snap up that and make that permanent. He's spent 4 years at the King Power Stadium, making 195 appearances. And obviously, barring the relegation, it's been a pretty successful period for the club. Consecutive fifth place finishes in 2019 and 2020, the FA Cup triumph in 2021, in which he scored maybe one of the great FA Cup final goals, rivaled perhaps by Gundogan's at the weekend. An incredible goal against Chelsea to win the game, about 35 yards. It was that game, quite an iconic final, I imagine, in a few years' time, because it was the first with fans. It was a really quite bizarre experience, but he scored an amazing goal in that game to win the FA Cup for Leicester, obviously won the Community Shield. But it will come as no surprise that following the relegation, he's one of the players that won't be making that step down to the Championship. He's certainly got the potential to go and play higher up than that. Because of how young he was when he made his debut for Anderlecht, it feels like he should be a lot older than he is. He's only 26 years old, but he's being released from Leicester, along with a number of players that I imagine will be snapped up quite quickly. Chalor Soyuncu is apparently off to Atletico Madrid. Fabrizio Romano saying that deal is done. Youri Tielemans, Daniel Amati, Nampalys Mendy, Ryan Bertrand, Ayoze Perez, and Tete, the Brazilian winger, who I thought had a really good game when Leicester played us just after the January window. So it'll be interesting to see where he lands. But back to Tielemans. This one is a really interesting transfer story because we were made the bookmakers' odds to sign, the favourite to sign Tielemans, sort of over the weekend, really. And that was interesting because there was no real concrete links. It was just, a lot of newspaper outlets saying Aston Villa are the new favourites to bag Youri Tielemans. And it's like, but nobody was actually saying there's any sort of concrete interest. And so that's why I've been a little bit hesitant maybe to touch this rumour, because it didn't ever feel like there was any sort of substance on it apart from what the bookmakers were hearing. But they clearly knew something I didn't, because we've had it today from The Athletic, from Greg Evans, who is as pretty concrete as concrete can get, in saying that it's pretty light terminology. We've joined the race to sign free agent Youri Tielemans. So he mentions that we're not the only ones interested in the midfielder, that some of Villa's Premier League rivals are reportedly interested in signing the former Anderlecht midfielder. We've had some, it's important to note that free agent signings have been something of a specialty for Villa in recent years, particularly Boubacar Kamara. Apparently Villa manager Unai Emery is really keen on the player and would like a move to be completed quickly after he missed out on a midfield target in the January transfer window. This is a really interesting one. I think he says that the club are expected to make an approach for Tielemans soon. So this is something we could really see ramping up in the next couple of days. So keep an eye on this one. I think you have to be careful sometimes when you talk about free transfers, because they're very often not that. There's so many additional fees, and you often pay a hike in wages because the fact that there's no upfront cost of the midfielder means that more clubs can enter that sort of frame and enter that conversation to sign them. So you would normally pay a bigger signing on fee and bigger wages to tempt the player to come to you in what is a expanded pool of clubs more often than not. But This is an interesting one because I haven't really seen too many other clubs interested. The only thing I do worry slightly about with Tielemans is because he's been playing football for so long. I wouldn't be fooled too much by the fact that he's 26 because he's been playing since he was sort of 16, 17 at a decent level out in Belgium. In football years, I think if you cut those legs open and counted the rings, he's played, 10 years of football going on 11 this year. And so that 26 can be quite deceptive. I imagine by the time he is reaching 30, his early 30s, those hamstrings, those knees, they're going to be looking at like slow cooked beef brisket, mate. They are going to be soft. And that's the one thing that I worry about, is that he's played a lot of football. But, if this was the normal 40, 50, 60 million pound fee that you see banded about for Youri Tielemans, I'd be kind of hesitant a little bit with this one. But on a free transfer, perhaps it makes sense. So that's a bite-sized introduction into these two players. More of one on Gonçalves, who I'm sure that people are less familiar with than Youri Tielemans, who's kind of been a bit of a diamond in the dirt in that Leicester side, it seemed, over recent years. But let me know what you think of these players, guys. It's really interesting that we're starting to see a lot of rumours come and go, a lot of the rumours that we've covered. It seems we've already missed out on Marco Asensio. That seemed pretty concrete before he moved to PSG. So let's see if Villa have any more luck with these deals. As always, your best place to keep up to date with all of that transfer movement is right here on the Villa podcast. We'll be back at full complement, I'm sure, real quick. Dan's only gone for about a week, so don't worry, you've not got to put up with me, myself, and I for too long. So make sure that when you're back, he's ready, you're ready. Drop a like, but subscribe for loads of transfer content around the Villa over the next few months or so, really. And drop a comment down below on how you feel about these players as well. I'm personally very happy to be addressing the midfield and the winger areas, because they're the two players that I think we really need players this summer, along with right back and striker. So let's see what happens in those positions as well. But in the meantime, guys, thank you very much for watching, and up the Villa.